What's up, folks? Welcome back to the Whoop podcast. I'm your host, Will Ahmed, founder and CEO of Whoop. We're on a mission to unlock human performance. A reminder, if you're thinking about joining Whoop, you can visit whoop.com and sign up for a free 30-day trial membership. That's right, try Whoop for 30 days at no cost to you. Today, I am joined by Jason McCarthy, the co-founder and CEO of GORUCK. Jason served in the Special Forces after 9/11. He founded GORUCK in West Africa with his wife, Emily, a case officer for the CIA. It all began with a napkin sketch for a rucksack that could thrive in Baghdad and New York City. Jason has overseen GORUCK's growth from living out of a truck, driving to all 48 contiguous states with his dog, to running 1,000 events a year and managing 500 GORUCK clubs all over the world. He proudly serves on the board of directors of the Green Beret Foundation. Jason and I discuss how he joined the military, his calling after 9/11. Developing the idea for GORUCK came to him while he was in West Africa with his wife. The sense of community and giving back, Jason's Whoop data, and Whoop community rucking data. Rucking is a hugely growing activity on Whoop. And what's next for Jason and GORUCK? If you have a question, we'll see answered on the podcast. Email us podcast@whoop.com. Call us 508-443-4952. All right, here's my conversation with GORUCK founder and CEO, Jason McCarthy. Jason, welcome to the Whoop podcast.
Great to be here, man. Thanks.
So, rucking, it feels like, has taken off in the last 2 years. Does it feel that way to you?
I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, so it's nice to see a few more people kind of get into it, but I don't know about taking off. When all the sidewalks in Boston are filled with people rucking, then it will have taken off.
I mean, my sense, and we've got some of this in the Whoop data, in 2023, it was the 12th most popular activity. And it had the 5th largest increase in the number of logs from 22 to 23. So it went up 49%. So our data would show that it's meaningfully growing in popularity.
That's news to me. It's fun to hear that.
Yeah. So I guess let's go back. You're 20-something years old and 9/11 happens.
Yeah, so I graduated from college in May of 2001, and it was one of those times in life where I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. You know, when you feel like you're meant to do something in this world and you just don't know where to start. Where do I pay my dues? I'll do that. And the military was not something that I grew up kind of, hey, this is the path that's for you. It just wasn't, that's not where our country was either. And so, I backpacked through Central America, and, traveling the world is probably not the best place to find yourself. You can have fun, but it wasn't the best place to find myself or my next calling or whatever it might be after college. And then the towers fell on 9/11, and I just immediately was drawn to, it provided a moment of clarity for me that I needed to serve my country.
Was there any history of that in your family? Where did you feel like that came from?
There was. My grandfather had been in Korea. He was an artillery officer. My uncle had flown helicopters in the Navy. But neither was really, my grandfather never talked about Korea, right? My uncle, I didn't see him much. He was always cool aviator, Uncle Mike. But it just wasn't something, you go back to before 20 years of war, or however long we were at now, it wasn't a thing. There was Mogadishu in Somalia in 1993, and then there was nothing until 2001. Nothing to speak of that kind of galvanized the country. And so it just wasn't top of mind. And I don't know where that came from. I did grow up in a family that loved and respected the military on all sides. And it's just, to go back to that time at 22 and watching the news where you're seeing guys with the green night vision goggles in the mountains of Afghanistan doing something that felt like it supremely mattered. Like in my core of my soul, like this really, really matters right now. And nothing else seemed to matter like that did.
And so you joined the Special Forces.
Well, it took me like 2 years to build up the courage to join the Army. It wasn't quite as simple as, okay, let me just go do this in a time of war. It was, because it's a serious decision, and I just gotten out of college. I'm supposed to have some big brain to think about things and really well, I guess. And, hesitation was probably, it took a little too long. But yeah, 2 years later, I enlisted into the Army and went through the training, which was about 2 years. And then in 2006, I earned my Green Beret, which is the same as Army Special Forces.
That's amazing. It's interesting thinking about that 2 years. Like, you knew in your gut you wanted to do it. You probably knew in your gut you were going to do it. I had a similar experience in college, like around the same age, where it took me about 2 years to know that I was or 2 years to have the courage, I should say, to start Whoop. And I think there is some theme of young people, early 20s, getting comfortable with trusting that intuition of like what path you're about to go on.
Yeah, and then just doing it.
And doing it.
Right? I mean, because
yeah,
you can be the guy later in life that's like, well, I was going to do this and I was going to do that. And I find those to be kind of sad in some ways, right? I mean, regret is a powerful emotion to carry with you. And so, I don't regret the things that I tried. I don't regret telling the girl that I love her. I don't regret those things.
Sure.
So it's, give it your best shot. And, nobody has it figured out. Right? Like when you started, you didn't know that it was going to turn into this. Maybe in your mind you say, okay, well, of course it could.
Sure.
Right? But it's more you have to just take your shot.
For those 2 years when you were debating it, what were you doing?
So the first thing that I did was it was a weird way that the war was fought. I mean, the CIA went in first, right? But the CIA went into Afghanistan with its paramilitary division. And there was a story, his name was Mike Spann. He was the first KIA killed in action in the global war on terror, and he died in the prison uprising. And, they told his story as a way to kind of galvanize America around the cause. I mean, sacrifice is a huge part of it, and it demands blood, I mean, sacrifice is important, but it demands blood. And his blood was shed, and that was something that was... really impactful to hear that story. So of course I did what anyone would do, and I applied to the CIA
right.
first, right? Which is a very long and arduous process. And that ate up about a year and some change of that process until I got way down in the interview path. And finally I'm like, hey, how do I do that job? I want to be that guy. And, it turns out Mike Spann had been a Marine before he joined paramilitary. He had special language skills. He was just the right guy at the right time to get sent on that mission. And this guy, I'll never forget him. He had a suit on in this Northern Virginia office, and he was like, hey, check it out. We don't just take guys off the street like you to go do that job. We take them from the special operations community. This is how little I knew, right? I guess I got to go do that now. So it was almost like a restart. And, Will... the truth is that's where I belonged at that time. I needed to go join the military. And that was kind of a way, I mean, I will say, the paramilitary side of the CIA is great, right? There's awesome people there. I ended up meeting a lot of them. But I needed to be in the military at that time, and I needed to kind of be on the front lines.
And you met your wife while she was working at the CIA.
No, we met before high school. Well, before she went to our high school in 10th grade, she transferred. We met on a tennis court in the summer in Florida, and we were friends all throughout all throughout high school, and then stayed in touch in college. Never dated, and then because you always got to make big decisions in never one at a time, always lots at a time, right?
Yeah, right.
So when I joined the Army, it's like in my head I'm thinking I'm probably gonna die. Right? I mean, that's what you think when you say, hey, I'm going to join the Special Forces in a time of war. You just don't know any better.
But you actually thought you were going to die?
Oh, yeah.
And you internalized that?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't walk around and tell Mom, hey, Mom, I'm probably going to die. She was already thinking that. But when I did this, it brings about, once you take that first step, once you, like, man, I got to go for this, and come what may. Right. Well, the other thing that I did was I told the girl that I'd always loved that I loved her. So
that helped.
Yeah, it helped. From the standpoint of, if you love someone, tell them that you love them.
you facing this enormously consequential situation and you coming to terms with potentially your mortality led you to just kind of get on with life in a sense. Like, tell the woman you love her, that kind of thing.
Well, I think it makes it more precious, and you don't want to die with regrets any more than it's better than you don't want to live with regrets either.
Do you think what you just expressed is common amongst everyone who joins the Army or goes into war, this feeling that you're going to die? Or do you think that you were just being very pragmatic about it?
I mean, I think it's probably a different time right around then. I mean, realize in 2003, October, the invasion of Baghdad into Iraq was in March of 2003.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where you would watch the nightly news, and at the end of the news hour or whatever, they would show the faces of the fallen that day. I mean, it was real.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
It was just all around all the time. And so, it was not a mathematical, statistical analysis around, well, there's this many people and I'm only one and it's probably not going to be me. That was not it. It was, there's a good likelihood that this is a decision that will cost me my life.
And you believed enough in the cause.
I did, and I do.
To make that sacrifice.
Yes.
What do you feel like needs to be done from an education standpoint or a patriotism standpoint for more people to have that love or accountability for their country?
That question almost gives me goosebumps to think about, because I think that there's so many simple things that we can do that are not being done right now. I mean, such as we need to find a way for the world that's over here on the left, not politically, just in general, the left and the right in any way, shape, or form, to actually be able to talk and get to know each other.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when you start getting into should the military be on college campuses, my belief is yes. And my belief is yes, because if you believe in a liberal arts education, I mean, like, you can study wars, but you can't meet a warrior. I don't get it.
Right.
Right? I mean,
That's
go study all the things of antiquity and you read it in a book, but these are the people that are right now going to serve our country. And if you actually get to know them, you'll find out that they are people too. And so since getting out is when out of the military in 2008, the aperture opens up a little bit, and to meet more people who have nothing to do with the military. It's a very scary thing, but I've found that fitness is a way to kind of bring people together. I mean, it used to be supper clubs and bowling leagues and whatever it might be, but you have these people and they just meet up and they get to know each other as human beings. And it's not just, hey, you joined the military, how many people did you kill, right? Like, it's not, that's just so kind of cringeworthy, right? It's just get to know somebody, right? And if they want to open up, they want to open up, fine. If they don't, then fine, right? But the point is we're all people. And I say that as I'm not better, I'm not worse, I'm just a person like the others. And I think it's important for people to ask questions and listen and not think about, well, that point of view is flawed and I'm going to, attack them for this or that. We all have different perspectives. How do we lead an examined life, You have to surround yourself with people that are different. You have to ask them about their lives, and you have to say, what was it like? And, nobody's perfect. And so you have to kind of take some of it on faith,
First of all, I enormously respect what you said and the sacrifice that you made in joining the Army. And I bring this question up about patriotism because, in a lot of ways, I have like this deep gratitude for being raised in America, and my dad was an Egyptian immigrant, and I had this amazing education. I started a company, and now it's this thing that I get to do every day and enjoy and create products for people around the world. And I don't feel like I'd be able to do that in any other country in the world, like that whole experience. Many would call that the American dream in a sense. And so I have like a deep gratitude for this country and for being an American. And yet I feel like increasingly that sort of sense of patriotism or gratitude is fraying and decreasing? Like if I just sort of look at, I'm 34, so if I look at maybe the last 25 years, like I feel a sense that that's been decreasing, and I don't know exactly what to point to for it, but I'm curious if you sense the same.
I think America is a big place, and I think there's a lot that's out there. And so I'm fortunate to kind of have one foot still very much in the military world.
Yeah.
Just the people that I'm around.
And those folks probably have a much more amplified.
Yeah. I mean, cities and countries and different states and it's different. It's different out there in farm country in Ohio than it is in, say, I don't know, San Francisco or something. Right? It just and the beauty of America is that we house all of these people. And for better or for worse, it's just the reality that it does sometimes take an outside force like a 9/11 or like a Pearl Harbor or something like that to actually provide this resurgence of patriotism. And because you're forced up front, up close and personal to deal with what other people are doing for our country. And then that gets passed along generationally. So, it's the natural course of things, I think.
Where did the idea for GORUCK come from?
When we would go out on missions, it was gun truck heavy. So Humvees was how we would get there usually. And everyone, you're on a team, 12-person special forces team. And everybody has a different job on that team, right? There's the weapons guy, there's the demolitions guy, there's the radio guy, there's the medic, the intel guy, right? And so everybody's kind of cross-trained, but everyone has a specialty. And we would all have equipment that we needed. You're all shooters first, and that's fine. But we would cross-train on other people's stuff, but we would also bring extra supplies, right, in the Humvees in case your vehicle's disabled, you have to fight, the mission goes bad, Murphy strikes, all those things. And so we would build or make a go bag or a GORUCK and put it in the trunk of the Humvee and take that out on missions. We all would have one that was tailored to ourselves. And so after my deployment to Iraq in 2007, I went to West Africa where my wife, then Emily, was posted as a case officer. And it was weird, man, because I'd come from this world where we had gun trucks in our teams and, there's machine guns mounted on the gun trucks. That's just how you're living. And then get to West Africa and it almost makes your skin crawl. So it's like, it feels like something could go wrong at any minute. You just can't. It's different. And so, went to her house and there's barbed wire around the fence. There's, guards that are there, not armed, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately based upon the training. And it was just kind of a second nature to me to make a go bag or a GORUCK for her. And to say, hey, put this in the car just in case you're out and about. And because they love a good coup in Africa, right? Right. And so, they want to flash mob a coup up, and at least you've got something extra in here that'll help you, get off the X. Did the same thing at the house, and then started talking to some people at the embassy, and they wanted, like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, yeah, it is a good idea. And so we were trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I still had a little bit of time in the Army, and she's like, oh, you should do the GORUCK thing. She set it in her spare bedroom at her government diplomatic house in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa. And it was like, oh yeah, that'll be great, right? And so the first idea that meant was provide these kind of special forces way of life, consulting, security services, or whatever that might mean, maybe in West Africa. And it kind of morphed into, well, this bag isn't that great. Maybe we should build a bag instead of just, the consulting services. So that led us down just as I'm sure you know, it leads down a path of just a million different crazy back alleys, and eventually you end up here.
Well, we're going to go down a few of those alleys, but first I want to ask, because I'm very curious, you've got a go bag for Emily that's to prepare her for a coup. What is in the go bag?
She was not allowed to have weapons or guns at the time, but when you think about what do you need if you are removed from your house and you only have your car? And maybe you need to get to the U.S. Embassy. Maybe you need to drive to Ghana, right? So you have, a change of clothes, you have radios, you have a knife, you have a tire repair kit, You have stuff like that would, food for the dog. I mean, it's the essentials sometimes, not always the...
What's something counterintuitive or something I wouldn't think of that's in that bag?
Well, I mean, this is a lesson after 9/11, but your shoes matter. I had a friend who was in Southern Manhattan, and she had heels. She worked at Goldman Sachs, and she had heels, and she had to walk the entire length of Manhattan north afterwards. And so after that, she always kept a pair of sneakers in her desk.
Yeah.
And it's like you make a checklist of the things that might be useful. I mean, it's medication or stuff like that as well. But it's really just the basics. A map, because if the cell phone towers go down, what then? What's where? Do you know where these things are? Another useful thing to have is a key that you can unlock the fire hydrants to get water out of them. Right? I mean, it's little stuff like that. If you don't have it, you can't touch it.
Right.
If you do, you can stay alive a long time.
That's one I wouldn't have thought of. The
security
key for the
blanket or something to stay. You can get really cold in warm places if it's it's raining or you get wet or you have to take shelter somewhere or whatever the case may be.
So, at what point did you realize you were starting a business?
I really fought it, frankly. It was a hobby for a while, and I still was torn, and I'm still at a very deep level torn about what it means to serve my country from the standpoint of I served officially for 5 years, and that's it. And so, the guys, when I got out, they went back to war, and I didn't. And that's something that it felt like they served more, And so as I was getting out, I thought the plan was going to be now to go back to the CIA and go in the paramilitary branch. And so we were back in DC, and it's like, okay, well, I'll go to grad school. Thanks to the American taxpayer, I had some money with the post 9/11 GI Bill that made it kind of a nice way to have some time to transition. So I was going to grad school to get my MBA at Georgetown, and had kind of started GORUCK in 2008, started grad school in 2009, and it was just a hobby, and I started it, at least publicly, with a pseudonym, and because I didn't want to kind of burn my cover, Like what if I want to go back and join the CIA and serve like that, I can't plaster my story or my face all over some company that's selling rucksacks. And so kept that until about, late 2010. I'd spent a lot of years at that point, 2.5 years, designing and getting built this rucksack. Started with an ad in Craigslist, New York City for a, quote, backpack designer, right? I mean, there's a lot of back alleys there, right?
There we go, yeah.
And had a drawing much like your drawing of your OG Whoop there.
Yeah.
And the problem was the hobby, I had to keep doubling down on it, right? You have to keep investing cash. So all my deployment money, all of my savings, I poured into building up stock and inventory, because if you don't have it, you can't sell it, right? And so at that point, when I had all of this inventory in my condo, I'm just swimming in bags that nobody wants to buy, I had to kind of figure it out. And so I started an event called the GORUCK Challenge, and that's where, I'm leading a class of people, and I have to kind of tell my story to get the word out. And then there's pictures that I'm taking, and pictures of them, but then pictures of us. And back then, it was, if it's on Facebook, it's on Facebook forever. And so that was the thinking. It's like I had to kind of, blow my cover to kind of go all in on GORUCK. And, it was worth it because of the impact that it had on the people that showed up. And so they changed my heart in a way that made it feel like service, right? So whether it's official service in the United States military or it's service to mankind in our country, however you want to look at that, like I had to make my peace with that.
Feels like that's maybe a core theme for you, is to be of service.
Absolutely.
And a good lesson for anyone, frankly.
I think if you fast forward to the end of your life, it's not going to be about what you accumulate. It's going to be about what you're able to give back.
Mm.
And that's really important to me, to kind of bake that into the sauce as soon as possible.
And you've built some of that even into your financial mission.
We have. So we just willingly donate 1% of our top line revenue back to various nonprofits in honor of those who serve or who benefit those who serve.
And how did you decide on those nonprofits?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in the military space for a long time. I mean, I'm actually on the board of the Green Beret Foundation, and we've worked with the Navy SEAL Foundation, and we've worked with a lot of the Wounded Warrior and Travis Manion Foundation and those kinds of places. And so these are kind of our friends, and we believe in their mission. And those two tend to go hand in hand, because good people are serving great missions, and you just kind of want to serve it with them. And then we also do stuff for teachers and firefighters and police and you name it.
For people who aren't familiar with rucking, like, what are some of the benefits to that as an activity?
So, I mean, just to define it, right? I mean, it's to put weight on your back and carry it, go for a walk. And so what rucking is if you can ruck 10 pounds on your back, or you can ruck 125 pounds on your back. They're both rucking. They will have dramatically different feelings on your body, and the outcomes will be different, right? It's the difference between jogging and sprinting like Usain Bolt or something, right? I mean, it's just completely different things. So, I mean, the benefits are, it's good for your heart because you're moving. It's good for your posture because your shoulders go back. Too many of us, we hunch over screens, we hunch over our phones.
Right.
You're just constantly in this state of hunch, and so it pulls your shoulders back, and your spine goes straight like it's supposed to. It's good for bone density because it's active resistance training. And I mean, the benefits also can be very social, which I think is an underrepresented part of our health journey, is what are our relationships like? And so whether it's you and your dog and you're rucking the dog, or it's you and your kid on a front loader and you've got some extra weight on your back, or it's you and your buddy and you're talking about your lives.
Well, it does hit on a huge theme right now in the whole world of fitness, which is this notion of the importance of zone 2 training, and being at zone 2 of your heart rate, which, from looking at rucking data, I have information here. 27% of the time you're in zone 2, and 22% of the time you're in zone 3. So you're spending a huge percentage of your time in those two zones, which are now thought of as some of the more efficient zones for building cardiovascular health, for losing weight, and a bunch of other people have talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can carry a conversation on. So I end up, I love my family. I love our mission at GORUCK. I only have 24 hours a day, like any of us. You know, I try to get really good sleep and feel good and healthy and energetic. And so I end up taking a lot of meetings with a rucksack on outside because I can kind of multitask that way. So it's more about how to fit it in, and it's not always this carve out thing where you've got to dedicate this specific time to just exercising. And so I think that's a really effective kind of zone 2, zone 3 outlet like that.
So the data I shared was on your actual heart rates during your rucking. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that if you look at the top 5 activities on Whoop for what percentage of time people spend in zone 2, hiking and rucking are in that second slot. So 40% of the time in zone 2. Mm-hmm. The number 1 is actually powerlifting, interestingly, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah. Golf, number 3. Yard work in the top 5. How about that?
I love it that you count that.
Yeah, well,
it counts.
I mean, people get after it in their yards.
You're moving, man. It's great.
Yeah, they want credit, and Whoop's 24/7.
What's up, folks? If you are enjoying this podcast, or if you care about health, performance, fitness, you may really enjoy getting a Whoop. That's right. You can check out Whoop at whoop.com. It measures everything around sleep, recovery, strain, and you can now sign up for free for 30 days. So you'll literally get the high performance wearable in the mail for free. You get to try it for 30 days, see whether you want to be a member. And that is just at whoop.com. Back to the guests. you've built this amazing business. Now, what's next for the company?
So our big goal is rucking will be bigger than running.
Wow. What would be reasons that could be possible?
So, I mean, first off, you know the deal. You say something like that, and everybody's like, that'll never happen. And, you know, if you look at the history of jogging or running, I mean, in 1967, Bill Bowerman, co-founder of Nike, wrote a book called Jogging. It sold 1 million copies, right? And then Nike got the early stages of Prefontaine and running and jogging and the fitness craze and all of that kind of took off, and America was moved to jog and to run and to have this sort of athletic vigor about them. And that has kind of waxed and waned over the course of time, as it will do, right? If you look at rucking, so carrying weight, this has been around since the hunter-gatherer days. We did not invent anything. We have merely tapped into something that is the foundation of special forces and infantry training. It's gone on since forever. And so reasons why are oftentimes easier to peg off of running. So running is the #1 cause of injury in special forces. It's a very, very injury-prone type of activity, and it's become a default for people who feel they want to get in better shape to say, well, I got to start running, right? Look, I'm for the things. Do the things. This is not some takedown where I'm saying don't run. Emily ran cross country and track at Georgetown.
Sure.
I got into it in the Army. I'm for running. The difference is the force load onto your knees is fractional. Every time you run, it's 8 times your body weight onto your knees. When you walk or ruck, it's 2.7, right? So you're dealing with, sprains and strains and all that kind of stuff. So you can do this throughout the course of your life. You can do this when you're younger. You can carry 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever the case may be. Book bags all over campus, right down there. You see kids with book bags all over the place. That's rucking if you put a little more action, energy, and purpose behind it. As you get in an age where, say you're your age, 34, you still haven't felt your knees start to go yet, to scale rucking up, it is how you prove Special Forces soldiers, Delta Force soldiers, British SAS soldiers. It is an incredible way to test someone's mettle and an incredible challenge as you add weight and distance and time, and you expect someone and demand them to meet those certain time hacks. As you get older, you start to say, oh, I can't do all the things that I used to do, but you can still put 30 or 45 pounds on your back and go for a walk anywhere that you go. And then you get even older. So you start to worry about bone density, those kinds of things. And you say, okay, well, I can put a little bit of weight on and go for a walk, and I can get all of these kinds of benefits throughout the course of a lifetime.
Well, you got me convinced to do a lot more of this. The question I've got is, what's the longest rucking you've had at the highest weight and set amount of time? From almost like from a fitness standpoint, the hardest you've had to do.
So I'll baseline and say 12 miles with 45 pounds is kind of a standard, right?
Okay.
If you get more than 3 hours is the cutoff. If you don't make 3 hours, you fail. And under 2 hours is the goal. So that would be about 10 minutes a mile for 12 miles with 45 pounds on your back. So
that actually seems really hard.
Especially if you haven't done it.
Yeah. Like if I were to just go try that right now, I think I'd find that incredibly hard.
And what you would want to do is shuffle. You have to it's just like...
Because you're still walking, but you're jogging.
10-minute mile.
Yeah, I guess you're moving.
Yeah, you're moving. You don't want to collapse forward. You keep your back up, which means you need to have the strength to carry the weight, right? And then you need to just shuffle. You can't really get that by just walking.
Okay, so that's the baseline. 12 miles and 45 pounds on your back and 2 to 3 hours.
Well, 3 hours is the cutoff. Special Forces, you would say, all right, try to get under 2. Now, at the final phase of my training, there's this event called Robin Sage, which is basically a mock war throughout the countryside in North Carolina. It's crazy what those good people down there put on for our benefit to go through that kind of thing, to learn what it's like. And the infiltration, we jumped out of an airplane. and you have 125 pounds on a ruck that's dangling from basically your belt in your front, between your legs. You sort of waddle to the door, you fall out of the plane, you lower the ruck hits, you hit like a sack of potatoes as well. Then we picked up that ruck, the 125-pound ruck, and rucked it for 18 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I can still feel the pain right now, right? It's like at some point you can start to smell the ammonia of your body just eating its own muscle to power forward. And it was, that was a mental test more than a physical test, because at some point you reach, this is just so dumb.
You're so past red line.
This is so dumb. And you have to have that grit in order to persevere.
What has helped you develop that grit? Like what place did you go to in your mind? What things did you say to yourself? How did you get through that?
Well, that was kind of the end of almost or over 2 years of training. And so you can quit anytime. This is not something where they're forcing you to stay. And it's just
By the way, that actually makes it even harder to complete if you can just quit at any time. Because any moment you can just raise your hand and say, I'm done.
Yeah, but you're invested by then.
I'm just saying, like, if you're stuck on the mountain or whatever, you kind of only have one place to go. But,
That's right.
If you can just raise your hand and say, I'm out, it's like at any moment your mind can betray you.
It can. And so I think what's important, though, is in that journey, confidence is earned. Not just the physical confidence to know, hey, I did this in phase 2 with 90 pounds. Okay, this sucks more, but it's going to end.
Yeah.
Like everything will end. And just the idea of quitting, it just hated the even thought. The best, worst shower you'll ever take is after you quit something like that. And I just refused to...
The best, worst shower.
I just refused. I could envision that because I know what the showers are like there, and they bus you back, and it's you and your own thoughts, and they put you in the back of a pickup truck, and you go back and you drop your stuff and you go take a shower, and what's that like? Not good.
And were you able to eat and drink over the course of that 18 hours, or was it pretty...
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, drink, yes. They were real particular about hydration. That was a thing, and we had these oral rehydration salts, which were nasty back then. There's a lot better stuff on the market now, but they were really, really critical on hydration.
If you look at the group of you that did that event, did everyone complete it?
Robin Sage, yes.
So at that point, that group had already hardened its capability.
I mean, it's a huge funnel. I mean, and it makes, like, you start out with a lot of people, and then it just goes down and down and down and down.
Do you remember what the last sort of moment was where it became something of a straight line, like whatever the remaining group was the group that just kept getting through everything?
They break it up a little bit, but to be...
Like the SEALs, famously have the buds moment. And...
I mean, to be really honest, it was something that I did not believe that I was going to pass this course until they gave me my Green Beret and my certificate of completion. There was such an element of fear throughout the whole thing.
Next, yeah.
It was also very, very humbling from the standpoint of the cadre, the instructors, were men that had been on the invasion of Afghanistan. The same war that I watched on the TV, they were the ones fighting that.
Yeah.
And so to have that here, I mean, it's like, am I worthy? I mean, you don't get to decide these things, and you have to do your best, and come what may. And so I felt very humble and very fortunate. You do have, like, the day that you earn your Green Beret, though, it's like you're king of the world, right? King of the world. But then you go to your team and everybody's a Green Beret.
Right.
They've actually done Green Beret stuff. You've done training.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, right.
So you just find that humility all over again. It's great.
That is amazing, isn't it? Just that journey, the journey of continually refining your humility in the process.
You have to surround yourself with that, or else it is a fatal flaw. Hubris is a fatal flaw. And if you don't surround yourself with people that keep you humble, you will fall prey to your fatal flaw.
What do you recommend today to someone who wants to become a Green Beret?
Well, first off, take the decision seriously. Think about it, right? but don't think too hard. It doesn't take 2 years. If you want to go through this, I mean, the only place to start is just, you have to go talk to a recruiter, and then you have to join. And I do believe in a call to military service. I think that America is better for people who answer the call to serve. I also think we need more than just military service, right? I think we need people who are called to become teachers. We need people who are called to become doctors and nurses. We need people who are public servants, who put the greater good before their own. And so the military gets a lot of love. And I've been a grateful recipient of that love. And if you feel the call to serve like that, I think that you should definitely do it, right? Train up. Rucking is the foundation of Special Forces training.
There we go.
So you need a ruck, you need to run. Not so much time in the gym. I made that mistake. I went for a lot of runs and I spent a lot of time in the gym, and I had a good foundation, but I joined the Army and I weighed 225 pounds. And what I came to find out, which I'm about 195 right now, right? And what I came to find out was this is my exact fighting weight. This is the weight that I was meant to be at when I was at peak physical condition when I was 25 to 30, which is the same weight I'm at now. You can't, the more weight you put on, the more you have to carry everywhere you go. And so I sort of learned the hard way that getting really big muscles in the gym was not useful. The running cardio base was useful, but the rucksack kicked my butt when I first put it on. It was not like anything I'd ever done before. And so that was something that, it hardens your body, it hardens your feet, it hardens your back, it hardens your shoulders, and it hardens your mind as well. And so I would spend a little bit more time under the ruck if I had it to do over again.
I see the Whoop on your wrist, so I have to ask, how long have you been on Whoop?
Earlier this year, so January, so 3 months.
And have you been enjoying it?
It's mostly about the things that are not. I mean, I've learned my body to some extent.
Right.
Like, I'm not an amateur in matters of physical fitness, right? It's the recovery side. It's the, what are the effects of alcohol?
Right.
It's the how well do you sleep and why, and what are the patterns in that. And so I think it's really important for us to question our own habits at times, to kind of baseline and reset and say, hey, let's question this. And sometimes you need to take a hard look in the mirror, and Whoop has certainly been, it's been along that ride. I've also been doing something called 75 Hard since the beginning of the year, which ended, a week or so ago, which is, 2 workouts a day and read a book. And I was on a high protein diet, because I struggle to keep weight on, not to take it off. And it was a lot of movement, and it was a lot of, I don't really understand yet how to get this dialed in kind of recovery plus, like, the sleep I'm good at. My sleep scores are good, right? Like between 94 and 100 almost every night that I'm not at
good.
A hotel or...
You would get the sleep bonus at Whoop.
Yeah, there you go. It's the recovery side. I got to kind of dial that in a little bit more. So,
well, it takes time, and it's figuring out what are all the different factors in your life that are contributing to it. And if I may, you've probably built a resilience to your body being run down that most people have not, which is to say that when your body is run down, your mind is capable of still pushing it to do extraordinary things, and in a way that can be a disadvantage to identifying what are the things that make me have a lower recovery.
It is a long commitment and a long road for me to accept that I can't do everything I want whenever I want if I just put my mind to it.
Yeah.
And so that's a really useful side to it. It's also, a bunch of us have done this, and I've gotten feedback from retired Green Beret generals and feedback from guys that work out in my driveway, guys and gals, about alcohol consumption way down, and it's a habit that they're sticking with. Screen time in bed down because they realize that it's bad, right? Sometimes it's really, really obvious things, and I think for a lot of people it's almost too obvious. It's almost like you can laugh it off, like, hey, if you drink a 6-pack of beer right before bed, you're not going to sleep well. But somehow, if you start to, if that really kind of, they drill if Whoop drills that in through your cranium over time, right? It's like, well, you can adjust this and feel better. Do you want to feel better?
It's a big, like, manage what you measure. You know, when you see the numbers against having that extra drink or, you know, doing the fill in the blank bad behavior that you kind of already know is bad, but when you just see it in the data and you realize that's what it's doing to your body, there's just a much higher level of accountability, I think.
Yeah, and it's a conversation.
Yeah.
That you have to have with yourself. And I think the examined life is the life worth leading. And so providing some ammunition to the examined life is critical, because guys and gals like me that just want to get after it all the time, I can rationalize almost anything away, right? Or say, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
If you ask me, how are you? I'm always good. Right? And yet you can't argue with the data. You can still drive on, but you can't argue with the data. And that's something you got to make your peace with, or adapt your habits and then make your peace with a different version of outcome.
Where can people learn more about GORUCK?
We're at GORUCK.com, and all the socials are GORUCK, GORUCK.
All right, well, encourage everyone to check it out. And Jason, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and thank you for all you've done for this country.
Thanks, Will.
Big thank you to Jason McCarthy for joining me on the podcast, and also a big thank you to Jason for his service. If you enjoyed this episode of the Whoop Podcast, please leave a rating or review. Please subscribe to the Whoop Podcast. You can check us out on social at Whoop, at Will Ahmed. If you have a question you want to see answered on the podcast, email us, podcast@whoop.com. Call us, 508-443-4952. Reminder, you can join Whoop for free for 30 days. Get the full Whoop experience. That's whoop.com. New members can use the code WILL, W-I-L-L, get a $60 credit on Whoop accessories. And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next week on the Whoop Podcast. As always, stay healthy and stay in the green.